Welcome back to Gig Harbor Paddling. Today we have Jordan Malloch, two-time Olympian, coming down to do a canoe clinic with us.
We had a new coach come to the club in 1995, and he really challenged us. He was like, hey, you guys are good, but you need to actually commit to what you're doing here, and I believe you guys can make the finals at Junior Worlds. And to that point, no canoeist had made the finals at Junior Worlds for the U.S. So it was sort of like a big step for us to take. But we committed to it, really good year of training, and that Junior Worlds was actually in Japan. I ended up qualifying in C1 500, and then I partnered with Dave Fort, who ended up coaching at Seattle for quite some time. When Alan was getting going here, Dave was the coach in Seattle. He and I partnered up and qualified as well in the C2 1000, becoming the first U.S. paddlers to qualify for that. So that was cool. Made the jump from junior to senior, and then got to represent the U.S. basically from '97 through to 2007 at the World Championships with the Olympics, obviously on the Olympic years. I got really lucky in qualifying for the 2000 Olympics because the U.S. hadn't qualified a spot in the 2000 Olympics. Now they had kayak. I think we had 5 or 6 kayakers that had qualified, and a male, and then I think we had qualified 2 women in the K2. So, but no canoe spots in 2000. We didn't qualify. The C1 got close, but wasn't there. I still kept paddling. I was planning to go to 2004. We raced at the Olympic trials in 2000, and so even though there wasn't a spot, we raced. I ended up winning that race, and literally 3 weeks before the Olympics, the Chinese paddler tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, and so not only did they kick him out of the regatta, they kicked China. China didn't get a spot anymore, so that bumped everybody up one spot, and the U.S. qualified a spot at that point. So literally 3 weeks before the Olympics in Sydney, I found out I was going to the Olympics. So that was a pretty cool moment for me, obviously. Got to go, had my, I had stopped, I'd gone to nationals, I'd sort of stopped, was taking a little bit of time off, cranked it back up, and I ended up actually PRing in the 1000 in Sydney. So that was awesome, and that kind of fired me for the next 4 years. 2004, I was racing with another paddler named Nate Johnson. We were never guaranteed that there was going to be boats for us in Brazil. So we made the determination to fly a boat, the C2, down. So, you guys are familiar how big a C2 is. Fly a boat down, and we had to figure out how to get it there, that the plane and the plane door was big enough to get a C2 in the cargo bay of a plane, and it worked out. So we ended up qualifying in the C2 500 to go to the Olympics in Brazil. I actually had the dream of going to the Olympics before I started paddling. So that for me it was more the other way around. Like I wanted to go to the Olympics, and canoeing became the vehicle for that, as opposed to the other way around, getting into canoeing and the goal was the Olympics. In terms of when I thought I was going to be on that path was, making the final, probably 95, making the finals in Junior Worlds. I'm racing against guys that ended up, winning multiple World Championship gold medals at that point. During school, we were on the water Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So on the water 5 times a week, 3 weight training sessions. So probably 8 sessions a week. We usually had Thursdays off, and then Thursday, Sunday off. So we're on the water 5 times a week, weights 3 times a week. So that's kind of and then during the summer, obviously we'd add second sessions because we were working school.
That's exactly our schedule.
Yeah.
We take Thursdays off too.
I mean, I don't know why that's something. I don't know why that's a thing, but that's sort of how and Alan probably learned that from someone else that learned it from someone else. I don't know why we take Thursdays off, but how long are you staying vertical? How long is the paddle vertical? How long is the fully buried? So right here, getting in and then sitting up from that, can you see it? From that point. So like you're fully buried there, right? Fully in, and we talked about at that point is where we want you sitting up. Look how quickly, and it's just gonna be the same for all of you, but the longer you can stay in that vertical paddle stroke, but look how quickly that evaporates for you. Next frame, you're already, instead of coming up, the hand, that we're now at a negative angle, right? You can see the hand, the top hand is in front of the bottom hand, and that's when you're, that's when you're coming up. You know, in a perfect world, you're buried there, you're sitting up, and that angle maintains there. And we talked about that's like the sort of in a perfect world, you'd have that angle the entire time. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that's going to happen, but that's the goal, is to try and keep that angle for as long as you possibly can. And that's going to come from sitting up, keeping a better body angle, growing over the paddle, and keeping those hands kind of at the same distance from your body. So right there is where we need to be thinking about sitting up. And you can see, and we were talking about this with you as well, getting that, you can see where that elbow is, that top arm is there. Got to get that rotation underneath that, right? Yeah. You can see the difference between what you're doing and how he's doing it. So having that, because your hips, your angle's fine. If you draw, and I'm not going to do it. If you draw an angle from the top hand to the hip, it's a nice straight line there. But it needs to be a line that's more open, more of an A. But this is where you need to start sitting up, and you're sort of rotating there instead of sitting up, and see how quickly you come out of, again, every single one of you, and certainly I could have when I was paddling, the longer you can stay in that vertical by getting out there and then initiating with the sit up, the better off you're going to be. I mean, that challenge you. Look at some of those guys that you were talking about there. How long are they staying in that vertical power phase? It's effectively there. You know, look how far out of vertical that paddle stroke is. You kind of need to be out of the water at that point. Look how far look at your blade there, right? You're at the P, right? You've reached all the way to the P. Part of this is, and some of you have said, hey, I'm not reaching far enough. And you know, hey, we can all aspire to reach further in our canoe strokes, that's great. But part of you are reaching out and then you're not catching where you're reaching. You're coming back, you're moving backwards in the stroke before your paddle even touches the water, let alone is fully buried. So you've done all this work to go forward, and then essentially you're pulling air before you catch water and move the boat forward. But if you can get further out with that bottom arm, less angle to begin with, again, I've said vertical like a million times today to each one of you, but the more vertical that paddle is to start off with, as opposed to that angle, we get more vertical, we get further out and straight down, as opposed to at the angle, and then we're kind of moving back before we are fully buried, right? So how long are we staying vertical here? Right? Vertical, vertical, vertical. Kind of getting out of it already, staying. So if you had a more dynamic sit up from there, you could see yourself staying more vertical over top the paddle, right? Yeah. Yeah. So again, not a bad angle there, but you should be well sat. You should be sitting up before you get to this point. You can see how square your upper body is to the front of the boat. Love to see more shoulder back, more rotation underneath the top arm there. Thinking about that catching out, and again, you're gonna come back naturally, but thinking about catching out on that blade. But again, earlier sit up, we're already kind of broken through that vertical. Earlier sit up. Good hip though. I like to see that hip rotation away. And then your sit up's good. Like you're kind of, it looks like you are bending a little bit with that bottom arm. So keeping that bottom arm straighter a little bit longer. It looks like you are initiating a little bit in like doing that biceps. I like that, how that motion from growing over the paddle there. It just needs to be earlier. It just needs to be earlier to keep that paddle vertical. That's the body part. You know, your lats, your teres. That's where you want to feel it, as opposed to, and even, you know, as you're rotating away with your hip, as opposed to that arm. It's something you're gonna have to work on, because it's challenging to get away from. Everything else actually looks pretty good. Set up, everything, but you can see how bent you are. You're already bent before you get to the exit there. Getting the arm straight, feeling that catch, feeling that straight arm in the drive phase as opposed to the bent arm. I want to see that top arm on top of the ear, not beside it or below it. You know, I want to see that back of the head underneath. You know, in a perfect world, underneath the. I know not everybody knows that, but in a perfect world, underneath that top arm. Yeah, you're still over a little bit. I thought you were actually going to sit up faster. Looked like you were going to sit up faster, but you're still. See how you're still sort of staying down and rotating around it, as opposed to further out. Good sit up. So more rotation. Also earlier sit up. More rotation would be good for me. See how forward your chest is toward the front of the boat. Let's see that facing the other way. And then again, like we talked about, getting the hand up. Getting the hand up on top of you know, kind of on the back of the head there. Above the ear if possible. Sit up early. We talked about that a little bit. Balance for you as well, being able to get to that. We talked about it quite a lot in the boat, of getting out, getting that pause, and reaching forward, and getting that confidence at the front of the stroke. It's a good example of how, you know, kind of going through that vertical drive phase. It looks good, but you know, you should be sitting up there. Can you do 20, 30, 50, 100 good strokes in a row, right? Staying off the boat, being confident in that boat, going through and paddling, and you know, because it's hard for me to give you a bunch of cues, because right now you're just like, I just want to go forwards. So, you know, looks good. I want you to you know, continue on the path you're on. Work on that. You know, certainly rotation. You know, you can see that you're kind of square to the front. Rotation, reach out, get on a little bit more. But just working on stringing those good strokes together, 30, 40, 50, 75, 100 of them, again and again. And that's going to be just time in the boat and paddling. So good. I mean, look at that really good open hip. You're almost hitting the gunnel there. Yeah. See, I like that. You're kind of getting that. You're kind of getting over it. See that where the hat. You can kind of see it's great with the white hat actually. You can kind of see you're getting up over top of that blade. Now, of course, you know, you haven't been working on it that long, moving out of vertical, but you can kind of see that drive out of the back there. A little bit earlier with the hips. Hips are pretty static at the back there. I like that. See how much, in contrast to what you had some difference between where the P is and where the paddle hit the water. He's pretty much straight down. Like he gets out there, and there's very little wasted from where he gets out to. That's exactly what I'm saying. You can essentially draw a vertical line, or maybe even like an acute line to where he actually hits the water. So where he's at setup to where he hits the water, he's not wasting anything there. Yeah, maybe he came back a little bit. Maybe a little bit at the end. Maybe I was a little bit too nice about that. But you're pretty close right there. Like right there, pretty close, right? You're still rotating. Love to see it. You know, you could definitely start that sit up right there. Keep that vertical. Because you have that good. You showed us that good finish. I don't know if you're going to show it to us here or not. Yeah, a little bit. You can see that a little bit. how you're coming into that, but you could definitely do a little bit earlier sit up. Not bad from where you reach out from your setup. You keep going though. You don't need to bury the whole paddle. Think about it like, there's no value to going beyond having that paddle fully buried, right? You want to think about it like there's a floor in the water that's exactly the same length from the tip of your blade to the throat or whatever we're calling that, where the shaft joins the paddle. Like, think about that. You want to have that. You meet the floor, vertical, and up. You're continuing to go down. You're past vertical there. But I like that sit up at the end. I just like to see a little bit earlier. You could go a little bit more dynamic with the hip guide, but I do like that. It looks good to me actually.